Hello everyone, welcome to the video, and today we're going to be talking about the best sleep build in Elden Ring. So this is a build that utilizes a few weapons that a lot of people do not realize have a certain effect when you mix these weapons with one of the sleep buffs that you can apply to your weapons. But before we get into the video, I would like to ask you guys to not only drop a sub, but to drop a like on the video if you enjoyed the build or you found this video helpful. As well as another thing I wanted to mention was that if you guys have any trouble getting any of the items for the build, a lot of these things are very farm heavy, as well as if you wanted to do this build for a prolonged period of time, it is a little bit of a hassle to be constantly farming the materials you need to make the grease necessary. So you can go to aoa.com and use code SARE for 3% off. I'll put the link in the description. But with that being said, let's get right into the video. So the first thing we always talk about in these build videos is the gear of the build. So for this one specifically, we are using 2 Ripple Crescent Halberds plus 24. I'm going to explain a little bit how this build works a little bit later, and why we chose these weapons. But these weapons are a halberd and they are absolutely amazing, and they scale with arcane. So this is going to be more of an arcane based build. So in our offhand, we just have the St. Trina's torch just because it's another sleep thing and it looks pretty cool. And then we have the Dragon Communion seal plus 9. For the fashion of the build, we have Mariah's mask, Noble's traveling garb, twinned gauntlets, and Melania's greaves. As for the talismans of the build, we have the claw talisman, which enhances our jump attacks, very important for the build, the ritual sword talisman, which raises attack power, and then we have the Dragon Crest great shield, which boosts our damage negation, and the last one is the shard of Alexander. However, you could trade this one out for the dagger talisman to boost your critical attacks a little bit more, which would be very useful since a lot of the time you are getting crits. For our flask, we have the opaline hard tier and the stone barb crack tier. These are pretty much interchangeable, you could use whatever you want. And then obviously we have the soporific grease and the sleep pots. And the reason we're using the sleep pots is because they actually scale off of arcane and can put people to sleep incredibly quickly. So for the stats of the build, we are level 150. We have 50 vigor, 13 mind, 30 endurance, 12 strength, 20 dexterity, 14 intelligence, 15 faith, and 75 arcane. So you actually can change up the stats of this build a little bit. I was just using the stats from a previous build, and I did not want to change them out. I didn't want to waste a larval tier since these stats were going to do. However, if you wanted to optimize this build a little bit more, you can easily take out some of the points in strength and dexterity and just use the basic requirements for the both of the halberds, and then just put the rest into arcane, since this is going to be a very heavy arcane build. So now we're going to talk about why exactly this interaction works and exactly how you're going to want to be using the build. So as you can see here, when I'm fighting the Godskin duo, I do have both of these weapons buffed. And like I said before, the reason why we're using these weapons is because of the fact that they are one of the only weapons in the game that come default with an arcane scaling with no blood buildup. So the reason why this is good is because we can actually throw on any buff that we want and it will actually scale with arcane. So in this specific example, since this weapon scales with arcane and it does it very well, whenever we throw on the soporific grease, it actually scales with the sleep status, and therefore basically it's the same concept as like a bleed build. You know, the more arcane you have and the higher bleed you have, the quicker that bleed bar is going to build up. And the same applies for this. Basically, if you have a lot of arcane, you throw it on these weapons, the sleep status effect will pop pretty much immediately on a lot of enemies. I tried it in PvP and pretty much 2 jumping attacks and the enemy was asleep. However, the damage on the 2 halberds with the jumping attack was enough to pretty much kill people anyway. So overall, I think this is definitely the best sleep build in the game, and I know a lot of people were using those 2 swords, and I just wanted to believe that there was a better method of doing this. And once I found out about the potential interaction between the sleep status and arcane, I definitely wanted to experiment, and this is what I found so far. And overall, there's 2 axes, I believe, and they're like the crescent axes or whatever, but I think the axe moveset is kind of terrible, especially when you power stance it, and overall the range that you get from the halberds was definitely much better. So I honestly think that this is without a doubt the best sleep build, and overall it honestly makes sleep builds pretty viable in the game. Before this, sleep builds were pretty much terrible because you just had to use those 2 weapons. However, when you use these, it's actually pretty solid. You can do like 1400 on the jump attacks, sometimes even more. And a lot of times you could put enemies to sleep very, very easily, which gives you a completely free either extra jump attack, or if you have the dagger talisman, you can get a completely free backstab or a parry. And this works very well with a lot of bosses too, even the ones that you can't put to sleep, because they actually stagger pretty easily. And for trash mobs or any enemy that is very prone to sleep, which I think like 99% of the enemies in the game are completely susceptible to sleep. I think there's really only like a few enemies in the game that you can't put to sleep or stagger, but nevertheless this build does insane damage, and with the fact that you can stagger enemies very, very easily, and the ones who you're able to, you can put them to sleep very, very quickly, much faster than any other weapon you're going to be using in the game, mixed with the sleep pots because they also scale off of arcane. So with the sleep pots, if you have like 80 arcane, you can put someone to sleep in just one sleep pot. So overall, this build is actually pretty incredible, and I haven't tried it much for PvP, but I can imagine if you guys wanted to optimize this build a little bit more and get good with throwing the sleep pots as well as the halberds and having an even higher arcane stat, you can probably do some pretty insane things with this build. But that's pretty much it for today's video, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time.